Dry, hollow laughter of cruel men echoed through the air. In the middle of the yard, a tall Apache girl hung suspended by a rope, her arms wrenched painfully behind her. Her body was covered in bruises, dried blood clinging to her sunburned skin. Her breathing was faint, barely there, but her eyes still held on, unyielding, defiant. 7 notorious thugs from Abilene surrounded her, forming a loose circle, as they took turns mocking her like it was nothing more than a cheap form of entertainment. "Just tell us where the water source is, and it all ends here," one of them sneered, shaking a canteen right in front of her face. She said nothing. He poured the water straight onto the ground, right at her feet. Laughter erupted, and then another sound cut through it. Hoofbeats, slow, steady, cold. Every head turned. A lone figure had stopped at the edge of the red dust, a stranger with a gun, a dust-covered coat draped over his shoulders, his hat pulled low, hiding half his face. For a few seconds, he said nothing. He only watched. Then he stepped down from his horse. When he spoke, his voice was low and sharp as a blade. "Walk away, you bastards. Let the girl go." A beat of silence. Then they burst out laughing. "Listen to this. Guy thinks he is some kind of hero." A gunshot rang out. One of them dropped. Before the others could react, the second shot. The third. The fourth. Before the dust even had time to settle, all 7 bodies lay sprawled across the cracked, dry ground. Not a single wasted shot. Not a second of hesitation. The stranger holstered his gun, walked over, and cut the rope. The girl collapsed, but he caught her just in time. In that hazy moment, she whispered, her voice breaking, "They will come back." The man did not answer. He simply lifted his gaze toward the horizon where a storm was gathering. The man lowered the girl gently beneath the thin shade of a crumbling awning. From his coat, he pulled out a small canteen, tilting it just enough for a few drops to reach her lips. She stirred slightly, her eyes opening slowly, but the caution in them never faded. "Do not waste water," she whispered, her voice dry and brittle. The stranger said nothing. He simply brought the canteen closer. After a few sips, her breathing began to steady. She looked straight at him, her gaze sharp as a blade. "Why? Help me?" His answer was short. "I do not like watching something like that." A moment passed in silence. Then she forced herself upright, even as her body trembled. "My name is Ayana. I am Comanche." The man did not introduce himself. He only glanced toward the bodies scattered across the yard. Ayana clenched her fists, a flicker of anger crossing her eyes. "They belong to the Iron Vultures, the most feared band of outlaws in this region." She took a deep breath, trying to keep her voice from shaking. "They are hunting something valuable, not gold, not land." At last, the stranger turned back to her. "Then what is it?" Ayana looked toward the distant horizon, where the mountains blurred in the heat. "A sacred water source. One my people have protected for generations." Her grip tightened. "If they take it, this entire region will be forced to its knees. No water, no life." A hot wind swept through, carrying red dust over the lifeless bodies. "What did they do to the others?" the man asked. Ayana was silent for a few seconds, then answered, "Those who did not leave disappeared." Nothing more needed to be said. They both understood what that meant. The man stood up, brushing the dust from his coat. He looked toward Abilene, where a storm was beginning to form. "Their leader?" he asked. Ayana answered, her voice lowering. "Silas Crow, a man who never stops once he wants something." A heavy silence settled between them. The stranger turned toward his horse, as if preparing to leave. Ayana gritted her teeth, forcing herself to stand despite her trembling legs. "If you walk away, he will kill them all." The man stopped. He did not turn back. He only asked one question. "How many are left?" Ayana answered softly, "Not many. But they have not given up." The wind grew stronger, and this time, the man did not take another step. The man stood still for a few seconds, then slowly turned back. The indifference in his eyes was gone, replaced by something deeper, heavier, as if he had already seen how stories like this ended. "Lead the way," he said. Ayana paused for a brief moment. She did not ask anything more, only nodded and tried to steady herself. The man stepped forward, catching her just as she nearly fell. No thanks. No explanations, just a quiet understanding between two people who had just escaped death. They left the farm as the sun began to dip, the heat easing slightly but losing none of its harshness. The path ahead had no clear trail, only cracked earth, scattered stones, and restless wind. "What do you know about that water source?" Ayanna asked as they walked side by side. The man did not look at her. "Enough to know. If it falls into the hands of someone like Silas Crow, no one survives." Ayanna clenched her jaw. "It is not just water, it is where our ancestors are buried. It is the soul of our tribe." A long silence followed. "Then we cannot afford to lose it," he replied. They stopped on a high ridge as dusk settled in. From there, faint lights could be seen in the distance, the town of Abilene. But that glow brought no sense of comfort, only the feeling of a trap waiting to be sprung. Ayanna spoke softly. "They have taken almost every well in the region. People either leave or disappear." The man sat down, pulling out a bullet and slowly polishing it. "That means they will come for the sacred water," he said. Ayanna nodded. "Not will. Soon, the night wind began to rise, carrying a chill that slipped through every layer of clothing. In the distance, a gunshot echoed faint, but enough to send a message. The man stood up, sliding the bullet into the chamber. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice lowering, "we are not running anymore." He looked straight toward Abilene. "We are going into their den." And this time, he was no longer just a man passing through. Dawn had not yet broken, but Ayanna and the man were already standing on a slope overlooking Abilene. The town lay still beneath a thin layer of mist, yet there was nothing peaceful about it. No sound of livestock, no voices, only empty streets, as if life itself had been drained from the place. They entered the town just as the first light of day touched the faded rooftops. Windows were shut tight. Curtains shifted slightly, but no one dared to look for long. Every gaze turned away. "They control this place," Ayanna whispered. The man did not respond. He studied every small detail, the deep wagon tracks pressed into the dirt, the heavy boot prints, and the strange markings carved into the wooden posts in front of the houses. Signs of the Iron Vulture's territorial marks. They stopped in front of an old wooden house at the edge of town. The door creaked open when Ayanna knocked 3 times. In an unusual rhythm, an old man appeared, his hands trembling, but his eyes still sharp. "You came back," he said, his voice rough. "Ezekiel Boone, we need help," Ayanna replied. Boone glanced at the man behind her, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Another one looking to die?" he muttered. The man stepped forward. "I just need to know where they are." Boone was silent for a moment, then opened the door wider. Inside, the house was dim. A few others huddled together, women, children, and a handful of men with weary eyes, yet still holding on to a faint spark of hope. "They have taken every well around here," Boone said slowly. "Anyone who refuses to leave disappears in the night." He pointed toward the distant mountains. "Their base is there. And Silas Crow, he is gathering men." Ayanna tightened her fists. "He is preparing to strike the water source." Boone nodded. "Not preparing. It is about to begin." The sound of hoofbeats echoed outside. Everyone in the house fell silent instantly. The man turned his head, his gaze turning cold. The hunt had begun. The sound of hoofbeats stopped right in front of the door. No one inside the house dared to breathe too loudly. Ezekiel Boone subtly motioned for everyone to move deeper into the shadows. Ayanna tightened her grip on the small knife in her hand. Her eyes locked on the door. The man stood still, like a shadow without emotion. The door burst open. 2 thugs stepped inside, dust-covered coats hanging loosely, guns resting at their sides. Their eyes swept across the room, pausing for a brief moment when they noticed the stranger. "Boone," one of them called out, his tone mocking. "Still not ready to leave, old man." Boone said nothing. The other stepped forward, squinting at the man. "And who is this? A new guest?" The air thickened. The man slowly turned his head, his gaze cold as steel. "Just someone passing through." The thug let out a dry chuckle. "No one passes through here without Silas Crow's permission." The moment he finished speaking, a flash, a single gunshot cracked, sharp and clean. The one near the door dropped before he could even reach for his weapon. The other panicked, barely starting to turn before the second shot tore through his shoulder, pinning him against the door behind him. The entire house fell silent. The man stepped forward, raising his gun straight at the survivor's face. "Go back," he said. his voice low but heavy with pressure. "Tell Crow. I am waiting for him." The thug trembled, blood running down his collar. He nodded frantically, terror filling his eyes. The man lowered his gun. "Get out." The thug staggered outside, nearly falling off his horse as he fled. A heavy silence settled over the room. The people inside looked at the man not with fear anymore but with something else. Hope. Boone shook his head slightly, half in disbelief, half in concern. "You just did what no one in this town has dared to do for months." The man holstered his gun, his expression unchanged. "Then it is time." Ayanna stepped forward, standing beside him. "You are drawing him here." The man looked outside, where dust still lingered in the air from the departing horse. "No," he replied. "I am forcing him out of the shadows." The wind picked up, and this time, the fight could no longer be avoided. The wind rose in waves, carrying dust and sand that lashed against the worn rooftops of Abilene. Inside Ezekiel Boone's house, the air was no longer just fear, it had become a tense anticipation, like the moment before a storm breaks. The man spread a crude map across the table, nothing more than rough, uneven markings of the land surrounding the town. "We cannot fight them head-on," he said, his voice low and steady. "The iron vultures outnumber us, and they know the terrain better." A young man immediately pushed back. "Then what do we do? Sit here and wait for them to kill us all?" The room fell heavy again. Ayanna stepped forward, her gaze sharp, filled with resolve. "We do not wait," she said. "We weaken them." The man gave a slight nod and continued. "They survive off the water they have taken. Cut off their supply. Force them to move." Boone frowned. "You are planning to lure them out of their stronghold?" "No," the man replied. "We are going to pull them into ground of our choosing." He pointed to a spot on the map, a narrow canyon near the sacred water source. "Here, tight terrain. They cannot surround us." People glanced at one another. The plan was dangerous. But for the first time, there was hope. A trembling voice rose from the corner of the room. "But who would dare do something like that?" Silence. Then a middle-aged man stepped forward. His face carried the weight of guilt. "I used to work for them," he said quietly. "I know their supply routes and how they move." All eyes turned toward him. Ayanna tightened her grip but did not reach for her weapon. "Why come back?" she asked. The man lowered his head. "Because I have seen too many people die, and this time, I do not want to run anymore." A heavy silence followed. The stranger studied him for a few seconds, then gave a small nod. "Then you will lead the way." Outside, the wind howled louder, as if signaling that something was shifting. Inside that small house, people who had only known fear were now preparing to stand, and for the first time fear itself began to crack. The sky darkened as the group moved silently through the narrow canyon. Wind howled along the rock walls, creating eerie sounds like whispers from the past. This was the place they had chosen, the place where fate would be decided. Ayanna stood on a high ledge, watching the distance. Red dust began to rise along the horizon. "They are coming," she said softly. Below, the man checked his gun one last time. Beside him, Ezekiel Boone and the townspeople stood with trembling hands, but their eyes no longer wavered. "Remember your positions," the man said. "Do not fire until I give the signal." The sound of galloping hooves thundered closer. Then they appeared. Dozens of riders from the Iron Vultures surged into the canyon like a black flood. At the center of their formation, one figure rode forward at a measured pace, Silas Crow. He did not rush. His eyes scanned the terrain, like a predator sensing a trap. "Show yourself," he called out, his voice low and cold. "I know you are here." Silence. A beat. Then the man stepped out from behind a boulder. Their eyes met. No introductions. No wasted words. Crow smirked. "I thought you died the last time." The man said nothing. He simply stood there, calm. "You always choose the weak?" Crow continued. "This time," the man answered, "I stand on the right side." A moment of stillness. Then Crow raised his hand. "Take him down." Gunfire erupted instantly, echoing through the canyon. From both sides of the cliffs, the townspeople opened fire at once. Bullets rained down, throwing the outlaws into chaos. Riders in the front fell, horses rearing in panic. Ayanna leaped down from above, moving fast and precise like a true warrior. At the center, the man and Crow advanced toward each other through the storm of bullets. The chaos around them faded. Only 2 men remained, and a debt yet to be settled. The gunfire slowly died down, and the real battle had only just begun. The gunfire faded, but the echo of the battle still pulsed in every breath. In the middle of the canyon, red dust blanketed the ground. Riders of the Iron Vultures lay scattered, and the rest had fled in chaos. For the first time, that feared gang had been driven back. At the center, 2 figures still stood facing each other. Silas Crow breathed heavily, his coat torn, his eyes still burning with killing intent. Across from him, the man stood firm, his gun lowered but ready. "You have not changed." Crow let out a faint laugh, his voice rough. Still refusing to die. The man did not answer. Crow spat blood onto the ground. "You think saving them changes anything?" A moment of silence. Then the man stepped forward. "At least, today, they are still alive." Crow's eyes flashed. He drew his gun, but the man's shot rang out first. Krove froze. His gun slipped from his hand. He staggered back, then collapsed into the dust. No final words, only the wind. A long gust swept through the canyon, as if carrying away everything that had just happened. A few days later, the sacred water flowed clear once more beneath the earth. The townspeople and the tribe stood together around it, no longer afraid, only relieved and grateful. Ezekiel Boone stood quietly, watching the stream, his aged eyes reflecting a faith long thought lost. "We kept it," he said softly. Ayanna did not reply. She was looking into the distance. The man was preparing to leave. He tightened the saddle, pulling his hat low. Ayanna stepped forward. "You could stay," she said, her voice low but sincere. "We need someone like you." The man paused. A brief silence. Then he shook his head. "You do not need me." Ayanna looked straight at him. "No. But I want you to stay." A moment brief, but enough for both of them to understand what was left unspoken. The man let out a quiet breath. "I do not belong anywhere." He climbed onto his horse. The morning sunlight began to spill across the land that had just been saved. Ayanna stood there, not stopping him, only watching. The man turned his horse and slowly rode away. No one called his name, no one knew who he was, but they all understood. Some people are not meant to stay. They are meant to appear at the right moment. And when justice is restored, they disappear, as if they were never there. There are moments when a person is forced to choose between the safety of silence and standing up for what is right. Kindness is not always loud, but it always requires courage to survive. When someone dares to step forward, to protect what is right even when facing danger, they are not just saving one life. They are igniting